They say the ocean hides more than it reveals. When you are out there in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but water, strange things start to feel normal. I had never been on a cruise before, so when I got the chance to go on one last summer, I grabbed it without thinking twice. A full week of luxury, sunlight, and silence away from the noise of real life. The ship was huge, beautiful, and filled with every kind of entertainment you could imagine. Pools, theaters, bars, even a mini golf course. Everything looked perfect. But right from the first day, I kept hearing something strange. People whispered about Deck 13. I thought it was a joke at first, something like those hotel myths where they skip the 13th floor because it is unlucky. I even laughed when I checked the map near the elevator. It showed only the 12th of December Ks. Number 13. Still, I kept hearing it in passing conversations. Not just one or two people, but many. Always soft, always fast, as if they did not want to be caught saying it. One evening, I heard a couple behind me at the dinner buffet. The woman asked her husband if he saw the elevator stop at 13 again. He told her to shut up and glanced around nervously. That got my attention. I tried to turn and ask them what they meant, but they quickly walked away. I figured it was just cruise rumors. You know how people get bored and come up with ghost stories. But later that night, when I was alone in the hallway outside my cabin, I saw the elevator doors open with no one inside. I watched as the floor numbers changed. 10, 11, 12. Then the lights flickered and it paused. I waited for it to return to the lobby, but instead of going up or down, the screen blinked. For just a second, it showed the number 13. Then it vanished. I walked closer, wondering if I imagined it, but the number had been there. I swear. The next few days I kept thinking about it. I asked the staff casually if there was a service floor or maintenance level below the passenger decks. Every time I asked, I got the same answer. Just 12 decks. Nothing below or hidden, but some of them seemed too quick to answer, almost as if they had practiced the line. The more I asked, the stranger things started to feel. I began noticing people who looked off. They would walk alone, always slowly. Their faces were blank, their eyes cloudy and wide. I assumed maybe they were older guests, or just tired. But one morning, I saw one of them standing in front of my cabin door, just staring at it, not knocking, not moving. I opened the door halfway, and he slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes were glassy and empty, and his mouth moved like he was whispering something, but I could not hear anything. Then he just walked away. I could not sleep after that. Something was wrong with this ship. I decided to search on my own. Late one night, I started checking the corners of the lower decks, especially near the staff areas. That is when I found it. On deck 4, behind a janitor's closet that was slightly open, I found an old metal door. It looked out of place, rusty and scratched. The handle was cold and stiff, but I pulled it open. Inside was a narrow staircase going down. No signs, no warning, just steps disappearing into darkness. I hesitated. Every part of me said to walk away, but curiosity won. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and started going down. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, I saw a hallway covered in thick, swirling fog. My flashlight barely worked down there, as if the mist was swallowing the light. The carpet was soaked and sticky beneath my shoes. I moved slowly, unsure of what I had just walked into. There were old chairs scattered around, broken luggage, even some toys. Everything looked like it belonged to another time. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and I heard a soft humming sound from somewhere deeper in the fog. I followed the sound until I saw them. Passengers, dozens of them, standing still like statues. Their skin pale, their eyes blank and wide open. Their mouths moved slowly, whispering in silence. I stood frozen, unable to breathe. None of them noticed me at first. I tried to step back, but my foot made a soft squish on the wet floor. All of them turned toward me at once. No expression, no emotion, just eyes, empty eyes. I turned and ran, but the fog felt heavier now, like it was pulling me down. I stumbled into what looked like a lounge area, and that is when I saw myself. He was sitting in a chair, same face, same clothes, but he was pale, like a dead version of me. His eyes were wide and screaming, but his mouth made no sound. He looked at me with terror, like he was trying to warn me. He raised his hand and reached out, but I backed away. I felt something touch my shoulder, and I turned to see one of the foggy passengers standing right behind me. Before I could react, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was in my cabin. Sunlight was coming through the small window, and I heard the morning announcements. It was like nothing had happened, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. Just for a second, my reflection did not move. It stood still while I touched my face. Then it smiled. Not me, it. I tried to tell people what happened, but no one believed me. Some even said I looked pale and tired, asked if I was okay. Others stared at me for too long, like they were unsure of something. I checked the elevator again, and never saw the 13 again. The janitor's closet was locked. No stairs, no rusty door, nothing. But I know what I saw. I started noticing things too. I was forgetting small details. My phone would show pictures I did not remember taking. My voice sounded different when I spoke, a little deeper, slower. People I met earlier in the trip acted like they were meeting me for the first time. And when I went to look at my cruise ID badge, I saw a different photo. The smile in the picture was just a bit too wide. The cruise ended, and I returned home, but I do not feel like myself anymore. Some nights I wake up and feel like I am still on that deck. I hear foghorns in the distance, even though I live far from the ocean. Mirrors make me uncomfortable now. I cover them when I sleep, because sometimes my reflection moves just a second too late. I do not know if I ever really left that place, or if I am just a copy pretending to be me. But if you ever go on a cruise and hear someone whisper about Deck 13, do not go looking for it. Do not be curious, because if you find it, something else might find you. And once you are down there, once your real self gets trapped, it is already too late. The version that comes back up is not you, not really. And you will spend forever screaming in silence, below the waves, while the world moves on without you. They told me not to chase stories that breathe in the dark. Some memories are better left in the mouths of drunks and old sailors, slurred and half forgotten. But I was never one to listen. As a travel writer for an online mystery blog, I have slept in haunted hostels and walked abandoned mines. But what happened on that cruise ship was different. That story was not content with just being told. It wanted to be felt. It wanted to be remembered. It wanted to be believed. The ship was called Mariana Star, a retired luxury cruiser that had recently been bought and refurbished for paranormal tours. I thought it was a gimmick, a cheap way to sell rooms and fill up their rusting cabins with tourists and ghost hunters. When I boarded it, I laughed at the cobweb decals and spooky background music playing through the halls. I treated it like a joke. That was my first mistake. On the second night, I overheard a bartender whisper about room 202. He spoke in a low voice to another crewman, both looking over their shoulders like they were worried something might hear. I caught just enough to make my curiosity burn. At exactly 2:14 a.m. every night, room 202 would flood completely with ocean water. Then by morning, it would be bone dry. No leaks. No explanation. No survivors. They said the room was sealed years ago, ever since a guest was found drowned in it with no signs of water. I could not resist. I approached the bartender later and slipped him a generous tip. He refused at first, eyes wide, sweat gathering at his hairline. But money changes fear. Eventually, he nodded once and told me he knew someone who had a key. The crewman he brought me to was missing 2 fingers and would not look me in the eye. He handed me the key with shaking hands and whispered to keep the lights off after midnight. That was my second mistake. I checked in at midnight, dragging my duffel bag full of gear behind me. The room looked normal. Beige walls, a small porthole window, neatly made bed. A faint smell of salt hung in the air, but nothing more. I set up 3 small waterproof cameras, one facing the door, one near the window, and one beside the bed. I checked the angles twice. Everything was clear. I sat on the bed, feeling a strange pressure in the air like I was being watched, not by a person, by the room itself. I told myself it was just the atmosphere getting to me. After all, this was what I signed up for, I turned the lights off at exactly 1 a.m. The room felt darker than it should, not just black, but deep, like something had closed in over it. I lay back, eyes open, listening to every creak and groan of the ship. Nothing happened for a long time. Then, just as the red digits on my watch clicked to 2:14 a.m., I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature, like stepping into an open freezer. Then the sound. At first it was just a drip, then two, then a rush. The walls started to hiss. I looked up and saw water seeping from the corners of the ceiling, not dripping, but pouring. The floor was wet within seconds. I scrambled up, heart hammering, but my feet were already splashing in rising water. It gushed out from under the bed, surged from the porthole like a broken pipe, filled my ears with the roar of the sea. I gasped, tried to scream. The water was cold and heavy. I reached for the door, but it would not move. My lungs started to burn. I clawed at the walls, slipped, fell, my face submerged in the rising tide. There was no air, only salt, only silence. I woke up on the floor, coughing violently. I was soaked from head to toe, clothes clinging to me like seaweed. The cameras were still running, blinking red. I stumbled to them and played the footage. My hands were trembling so bad I almost dropped the device. What I saw on the screen made no sense. The video showed me lying on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. Then at 2:14, I sat up, started flailing, gasping, drowning in what looked like thin air. No water was visible, not a drop. I looked like a madman, thrashing in an invisible ocean. On the bed, on the floor, clutching my throat as if I could not breathe. Then I collapsed and went still. The room on camera stayed dry the whole time, completely dry. I ran from the room. I did not even stop to gather my things. I told the captain. He did not look surprised. He simply said, "We do not speak of room 202. When I demanded to see the footage again, he took the camera, nodded, and told me it would be reviewed. I never saw it again. That was 3 years ago. I still have nightmares of drowning in dry air, of salt in my lungs and walls that hiss like waves. I still wake up gasping, my bedsheet soaked in cold sweat that smells faintly of the sea. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left that room, or if part of me is still there, floating just beneath the floorboards, waiting for the next guest." I recently found a news article from last month. A man was found dead in room 202 on the Mariana Star. The door was locked from the inside. Cause of death was drowning, but the room was completely dry. The authorities called it a freak accident. The body was buried at sea. No investigation followed. I tried to warn them. I even sent in a report. No one responded. No one ever does. That room is hungry. It pretends to be empty. It pretends to be dry. But at 2:14 a.m., it remembers. And it takes. If you ever find yourself on that ship, walking past a door with peeling gold numbers and a faint smell of ocean breeze, do not stop. Do not look. And whatever you do, do not open the door. Some rooms are sealed for a reason. Some stories are not meant to be told. I used to love cruises. The calm waves, the endless blue stretching far into the horizon. The feeling that you were cut off from the world, just enough to feel free. I took my first cruise when I was 13, and ever since then, I made it a point to go on at least one every couple of years. But there is one cruise I can never forget, not because it was the most beautiful or the most exciting, but because something happened on that ship that I still cannot explain. I am not telling this story for attention. I am telling it because I cannot sleep at night without remembering that static message and the moment I opened that door. It was a week-long cruise through the Caribbean. The ship was huge and luxurious, with 13 decks and more restaurants than I could count. I was traveling alone this time, hoping to disconnect from work and just enjoy the sea. I had a cabin on deck 8, nothing fancy but comfortable enough. The first few days were uneventful. I lounged by the pool, ate too much, and wandered the decks at night, under the stars. But on the third night, something strange happened. I woke up suddenly, around 3:30 in the morning. The television in my room was on, but it was just static. That did not make sense because I always turned it off before sleeping. As I sat up, Rubbing my eyes, the screen flickered, and then a message appeared in jagged white text. It said, "Do not open the door, no matter what you hear." I stared at it, thinking it must be a prank or some weird cruise line emergency test. But before I could react, the screen blinked back to static and then turned off by itself. I waited, half expecting an alarm or someone to knock on the door, but nothing happened. I finally shrugged it off as some kind of glitch and went back to sleep. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to one of the waiters at breakfast, but he just laughed and said I must have been dreaming. I asked a few other people too, but no one seemed to know what I was talking about. That night, I set an alarm for 3:30, just to see if it would happen again. I stayed up in bed with my phone ready to record. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the television turned on by itself. Same static, same message. Do not open the door, no matter what you hear. This time, I managed to get a shaky recording before the screen went black again. And then I heard it. Soft at first, like someone sobbing outside in the hallway. Then the crying got louder, and I could hear someone saying, "Please, I am locked out. Please help me." It sounded like a young woman. I froze. My hand hovered over the door handle, but I remembered the message. I waited there for maybe 20 minutes. The crying turned into banging. Then it stopped. Just like that. Total silence. In the morning, I went to the front desk and asked if anyone had reported hearing crying, or if someone had been locked out of their cabin. The woman behind the counter looked at me kindly but firmly and said there had been no such report. I tried to show her the recording on my phone, but the video would not play. It showed the first few seconds of static, then just cut to black. I knew something was wrong, but I could not make sense of it. That night, I tried to stay awake again. This time I drank 2 cups of coffee after dinner and kept the lights on. I sat on the edge of the bed with my camera propped up on a small tripod facing the door and the television. At 3:33 a.m., the television came on again. Same message, same static, and then came the crying. But this time the voice was different. It was deeper, more desperate. "Please help me, they locked me out. I am scared. Please let me in." I watched the camera blink its little red light. I knew I should not open the door. The message had said not to. But something about the voice made me feel guilty. What if it was real? What if someone needed help? I stood up slowly and walked to the door. I placed my hand on the knob. The voice got louder, closer, like the person was right on the other side of the door. I looked back at the television, but it had turned off. Everything was silent except for the voice and my own heartbeat. I opened the door. There was nothing there. No one in the hallway. Just the same clean carpet and soft yellow lights. I stepped out and looked around. Not a single sound. Then I turned back to go into my cabin, but the door slammed shut. I reached for my keycard, but it was not in my pocket. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. My cabin was empty. I knew that because I had been alone. I started to panic and pounded harder. Suddenly, everything around me changed. The hallway lights flickered and then went dark. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was only darkness stretching in both directions. I do not know how to explain what happened next. I felt like I was falling even though I was standing. I felt like I was being pulled through the floor. Everything went cold. I screamed, but no sound came out. And then nothing. The next thing I remember is darkness. A deep silence that felt heavy. I do not know how long I was there. Hours, or maybe days. Then I heard a door open and light spilled in. But it was not for me. It was someone else. I was watching now, like a ghost. I saw a young couple enter what used to be my cabin. They were laughing and rolling their suitcases inside. The woman commented on how clean the place was. The man went to the television and turned it on. I wanted to scream, but I had no voice. I watched as he looked confused and tapped the remote. The woman unpacked her clothes. I wanted to warn them. I wanted to tell them not to stay there. The man found my camera on the shelf by the bed. It had not been there before. It should have been in my hand. He played the last recording. The video showed me standing at the door, listening. Then it showed me opening it, but nothing came in. I just stood there. Then the screen glitched, and my face turned to look directly at the camera. My eyes were completely black. The man shut off the camera quickly and said it must be a prank. They both laughed. I could not laugh. I could only watch. I do not know what I am now. I do not eat. I do not sleep. I do not exist in any normal sense. But I am still in that cabin. Every night at 3:33 a.m., the television turns on. The message appears. Do not open the door, no matter what you hear. And I watch, waiting, hoping someone will listen. Because if they do not, the door opens again, and I am not the only one behind it anymore. I used to love the ocean, the way it stretched forever, the calm it brought. I used to think there was nothing more peaceful than standing on the edge of a ship and staring at nothing but water. Now when I see the sea, I feel cold. I feel like it is watching me back. I cannot forget what happened on that cruise. It started like a dream. It was a gift from my company for 5 years of loyal work. A free 7-day cruise with food, entertainment, and sunshine. I had never been on one before, so I was excited. The ship was massive and beautiful, filled with laughter, music, and endless activities. I spent my first day exploring every deck, taking pictures, and enjoying the endless buffet. Everything was perfect until the second night. I had gone out on the upper deck for some air around midnight. Most people were asleep or at the bar. It was quiet, except for the soft sound of waves. That was when I noticed something strange. 4 crew members were walking along the far side of the deck. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then I noticed how they moved. Their steps were perfectly timed, like dancers in a show. They walked in a line with their backs straight, arms still, and eyes staring forward. I expected them to be chatting or at least blinking, but they were silent and stiff, like puppets. I watched them pass by under a broken light that flickered. As they disappeared into the shadows, I felt a sudden chill. Something felt wrong, but I told myself it was just my imagination. The next morning, I asked a crew member about them. I described the uniforms and how they walked. She looked confused and told me there was no crew working that area at night. I laughed awkwardly and said maybe it was part of a performance. She smiled politely and walked away, but something in her face told me she was not comfortable. That night, I stayed up again, standing in the same spot where I had seen them. Around the same time, I saw them again. The same 4 crew members, same movements, same silence. I followed them this time, keeping my distance. They moved to the lower decks where passengers were not allowed. The lights grew dimmer as I went down. When I turned a corner, they were gone. I kept trying to see them every night, and every night they appeared around the same time, always in dim places, always moving the same way. I started noticing something else. No matter where I stood, I never saw them blink, not once. I even stood close enough one night that I could see their faces clearly. Their eyes were wide, dry, and empty. There was something wrong with their skin too. It looked pale and wet, like they had just come out of the ocean. They did not speak or look at me. They just kept moving. I tried to talk to other passengers about them, but everyone either ignored me or changed the subject. One old man leaned in and said quietly, "You should stop watching them." That was all he said. He left before I could ask more. My curiosity turned into obsession. I needed to know what they were. I started skipping meals and shows. I spent my days researching anything about haunted ships or ghost sailors, but nothing I found matched what I was seeing. On the 5th night, I followed them farther than ever before. They moved past the cargo doors into a part of the ship that looked unused. The walls were rusted and the floors were wet. I almost turned back, but something told me to keep going. I walked for several minutes until I heard the sound of water dripping. It echoed through the hallway like a slow heartbeat. Then I saw the door. It was a metal door slightly open. Inside, the room was dark, but I could see something glowing faintly. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. There was a large circle drawn on the floor with salt water. Symbols I had never seen before were carved into the metal floor. In the center was a small pool of dark water that looked like it did not belong there. Around the circle stood the crew members, all of them, not just the 4 I had followed. There were at least 20, all in perfect formation, all silent, all staring at the center of the circle. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. Then one of them turned to face me, his eyes locked onto mine. Slowly, the others turned too. Their heads moved in perfect unison. None of them blinked. They did not speak. They started walking toward me in silence. I stepped back, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. They surrounded me without touching me. Then one of them pointed to the center of the circle. My feet moved without my control. I walked to the center and stood inside the saltwater lines. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. They all knelt at once. The room grew darker. The glow from the symbols grew brighter. I could hear something whispering in my head, but it was not in any language I knew. It sounded like the ocean speaking through my bones. Then everything went black. I do not know how long I was unconscious. I woke up in my cabin. At first I thought it was a dream, but my uniform had changed. My clothes were no longer mine. I was wearing the same crew uniform they wore. Wet, cold, too tight. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I could not make a sound. I looked in the mirror and something in my eyes had changed. They looked hollow, empty. That day I did not eat. I did not go to the deck. I just stood in the hallway. I watched. I moved without thinking. I followed the others. No one noticed. No one asked where I had been. It was like I had always been a crew member. I tried to write something down, but my hands would not listen to me. At night, I walked the same path the others did. I saw passengers watching us with fear. I wanted to scream, to beg them to help me, but my mouth stayed shut. My mind was locked in a body that no longer belonged to me. We moved together, silent, in rhythm, like waves. Now the ship has docked. A new group of passengers has come aboard. They smile and laugh just like I did. I stand in the hallway and watch them pass. Some of them look confused when they see us. Some of them look scared. I want to tell them to turn back, to get off the ship, but I cannot. All I can do is watch. All I can do is wait for the next one to follow us, to see the saltwater circle, to stand where I stood, because once you step inside it, you do not leave. You become part of the crew, part of the ritual, part of the sea. They say the sea holds secrets, that its depths carry things we are not meant to understand. I used to laugh at that idea. I liked logic, plans, and reasons for everything. That was before I stepped aboard the Solstice Voyager, before I was placed in cabin 609. I never believed in curses. Not until that week. The cruise was supposed to be a relaxing break from a messy life. I had just left a long job I hated, ended a quiet relationship that had turned cold, and thought a week on a luxury liner might fix the cracks inside me. When I arrived, they told me there had been a booking issue. The receptionist looked confused as he typed on his computer. Then he looked nervous. He called someone, whispered something, and finally handed me my key card. Cabin 609, sir. I remember him saying it like he was unsure if he should. I walked down the long hallway, wheeling my suitcase behind me, and noticed a couple staring at me as I passed. When they saw my cabin number printed on the envelope in my hand, the woman went pale. She grabbed her husband's arm, and they both turned away quickly. I thought maybe they were just strange or nosy. I was wrong. Cabin 609 was quiet, clean, and looked like any other small cruise room. A bed, a wardrobe, a mirror above the desk, and a small window showing the endless ocean. It smelled faintly of salt and something else I could not place, something like old metal. The first night was calm. I had dinner, watched the sunset from the deck, and came back to my cabin to sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a soft knocking sound. It was rhythmic. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. It sounded like it came from the wardrobe. I was half asleep and figured it was something from another room. Maybe the ship creaked in strange ways. I fell back asleep quickly. The second night, it happened again. Same time. I looked at my phone. 3:06 a.m. Same knocks. This time I got up and opened the wardrobe. Nothing inside but the 2 cruise robes and hangers. I went back to bed and tried to laugh it off. But when I woke in the morning, the carpet beneath the wardrobe was wet. Not damp. Wet. Like someone had poured a glass of water. I told the staff, and a cleaner came by. She barely stepped into the room before stopping. She looked around, eyes wide, then asked in a quiet voice which cabin this was. When I said 609, she mumbled an apology and left quickly. No one came back after that. The third night, I dreamed of water, cold water rushing into a small space, my body sinking slowly, lungs burning. I woke up gasping, my shirt damp with sweat. That same knock came at 3:06. I stayed in bed, frozen, staring at the wardrobe. The mirror above the desk caught my eye. In the dim light from outside, I saw my reflection sitting up in bed, but it looked different. My face was pale, eyes sunken, and there was something behind me, a shadow leaning over. I turned quickly. Nothing there. The wardrobe door creaked open on its own. I did not sleep again that night. On the fourth day, I decided to check the room more closely. I lifted the mattress and found nothing. Checked inside drawers. Nothing. Then, I looked under the bed. My hand brushed against something wrapped in plastic. I pulled it out. An old leather-bound book, swollen from water damage. A diary. The pages were soft and fragile. Most were unreadable, but a few were still clear. It belonged to someone named Eliza. The last few entries spoke of a husband who would not listen, who laughed at her fears. She wrote about dreams of drowning, about the sound of knocking in the night. Then there was a final page. It was smeared and shaky. She wrote that she had filled the bathtub, held him down until he stopped moving. Then she wrote something that chilled my blood. I will open the door for him again at 3:06. Then I will join him. The next page had a long streak of dark ink that almost looked like blood. After that, the rest of the pages were blank. I wanted to leave the room. I tried, but my key card would not work anymore. I went to the front desk and told them the lock was broken. They looked confused, then tried to search my room number. Their computer froze. The woman at the counter said she could not find a cabin 609 in the system. I pulled out the keycard envelope and showed her. Her hands shook. "Sir, this cabin was sealed last year. I do not know how you were given this. We were told it was locked for good." My skin went cold. She promised to send someone, but no one came. I went back, thinking maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe it was all just dreams and stress. That night, the knocking came again, louder this time. I shouted at the wardrobe, told it to stop, told whoever, or whatever, was behind it to leave me alone. The air in the room grew heavy, like it was hard to breathe. Water began to drip from the ceiling, not just from one spot, from everywhere. Cold drops hitting my skin. The mirror fogged up. I wiped it and saw my face, but it was not me. The reflection smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Behind it, the wardrobe door swung wide open. A shadow crawled out. I turned, but nothing was there. I grabbed my suitcase and ran to the door. It would not open. I pulled, kicked, screamed. No sound escaped. The lights flickered, then died. Only the soft blue emergency light remained, casting long shadows. I do not know how long I sat there, staring at the mirror. My reflection no longer moved with me. It blinked when I did not, smiled when I was silent. Then, without a sound, it reached toward the glass. I felt a cold touch on my back. I turned, but there was only air. The diary was gone. The wardrobe was open, but empty. The water kept dripping. I screamed again, but the ship had forgotten me. I was alone, trapped. On the final night, I stopped trying to fight it. Something inside me changed. I stood in front of the mirror and watched as the reflection slowly became clearer, more defined. It was no longer just me. It was the room, the wardrobe, the dripping water, the hands that knocked every night. I pressed my hand to the mirror. It felt solid, but the reflection moved through it. I understood then. Eliza never left. Neither did her husband. And now, neither would I. I do not remember falling asleep, but I woke up standing in the middle of the room. The sun was rising through the window. The water was gone. The mirror was clean. The wardrobe was closed. The door behind me opened with a click. A new guest stood there, confused, holding a keycard. Cabin 609. I smiled. I welcomed him in. I knew now what I was. A part of the room. A part of the curse. I waited, Every night for 3:06, for the knock, for the mirror to change, for the next one to take my place, because the sea holds secrets. And so do the rooms we lock and forget. I was forgotten, but I will never be gone. If these stories gave you chills, there's more waiting in the shadows. Subscribe to Horror Spectrum and never feel alone again.